pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moving to communications, are there any items from council?
I do have one. Is this picking me up? I know that tonight we have a first reading on an ordinance dealing with camping on rights-of-way, which are city property. In the near future, I would like to have some discussion about the status of our ordinances with regard to private property, as to whether camping is allowed on private property in the city and what the regulations or requirements are. For instance, I know that manufactured housing has to be in a manufactured housing park or on property that you own. I would think that we should have something dealing with camping, and if we don't, then I think we need to have a discussion. I would like us to have a discussion and perhaps look at an ordinance, but that is private property, which is not related to tonight's topic. It's an offshoot of it.
All right, any other items?
I have one. There's a ditch on Breckman Avenue over, I think close to John Wesley Methodist Church. And they just had asked if that is a city-owned ditch or if it was privately owned, because they didn't know who needed to be taking care of it. And I told them there were some regulations on whether the steepness of it and everything else, but I told them I'd bring it tonight. I just have someone on staff get with me tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Let me know, and I'll get back with the church and let them know.
Okay,
Thank you, for sure.
Thanks.
any other items from council? Then we'll move on into citizens' communication. And let me state that we typically allow 5 minutes for citizens' communication. I am the timekeeper, and I will give a signal when you have about 20 seconds left to wrap it up. And I would ask that anyone that's here tonight to speak to item C1, which is the ordinance relative to camping, please reserve your comments for the public hearing section of the meeting on the agenda. And with that, I would ask anyone here to speak to any other item that's not on any of the public hearings, please step forward. Seeing none, we'll move forward.
Item C1 is an ordinance amending Chapter 15 of the City Code to prohibit camping in public places, repealing all conflicting ordinances, providing for enforcement, publication, codification, and savings, and declaring an effective date.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'd like to kick off this conversation with just updating you on some of the meetings that I've been a part of, and John Kaminsky has been a part of, and the mayor has been a part of some of these as well, related to this issue of homelessness in our community. There was quite a bit of feedback received at the last meeting during citizen communication related to some figures on the number of homelessness, or there was questions regarding, do we have shelters? Some of them might be open, some of them might be closed. So I figured it would be prudent to provide you with some factual information as I've come to know it, so that hopefully for tonight's conversation, it's rooted on that information that's been verified and confirmed by staff through some of these meetings that have taken place. In the last few weeks, we've prioritized meeting with some of the entities that do offer sheltering services because, of course, the correlation between shelters and the anti-camping ordinance that's up for discussion tonight. Some of those include, of course, Midcoast Family Services, which of course run the Women's Crisis Center. And so I wanted to provide you with the facts that that is an emergency shelter that has 40 to 44 beds in terms of capacity, but is prioritized for women in crisis. And so that is one of the emergency shelters that we have. The other emergency shelter that we have available is run through the Salvation Army, which was mentioned at the last meeting, had closed down after the hurricane and has reopened, and as a matter of fact, just reopened this past week. Not to the full extent that it existed before, but it does have capacity for 18 beds that is predominantly focused on men. I know that was a topic of conversation that came up at the last meeting. Both of these, under the sort of the view of emergency shelters, are short-term. And so as an example, the Salvation Army is a 30-day shelter for the most part, and the Women's Crisis Center can go up to 60 days. There was also some talk about some of the other transitional housing shelters and confusion about whether they're considered emergency shelters or not. And so I just wanted to confirm for you that some of the others in our community, like Perpetual Home as an example, or even the Wellness Center run by Gulf Bend, those aren't emergency shelters. Those are more transitional type of facilities. And so those wouldn't be facilities that a homeless person, for example, would go directly off the streets to that shelter. So I wanted to confirm some of that for you. I also wanted to confirm the city's involvement with assisting with funding with some of these facilities. There was also some comments made at the last meeting about questions regarding the city's acknowledgement of the issue and then also our support for that. And so, as you know, and this is for the benefit of the public and people that might be watching at home, the city does go through a CDBG process that, as you know, funds public services and public facilities. And in the last 10 years, the city has invested roughly $2.2 million with agencies that play a role in homelessness. The majority of that, close to 80%, going towards public facilities like the ones that I just mentioned. And so, for instance, Council, you're aware of this, but again, for the benefit of the public, the Women's Crisis Center over the last 10-year period has received, including what's on the agenda for tonight, almost $1 million for that facility. The Wellness Center, which is a transitional housing facility, has received a little over $500,000. Perpetual Home this year is proposed to receive $50,000 for some improvements to their facility. The Salvation Army collectively over that 10-year span has also received about $125,000 in assistance from us. And so I mentioned that because I think it's important that everybody understands that the city has been supportive of assisting with addressing homelessness through this funding source that we have. Of course, there could always be more done, but I think it's important that you all know that the city has provided assistance to these agencies in the past. Alongside the agencies that are involved with shelters, we also, the mayor and I, had a chance to meet with the executive board of the Homeless Coalition, which is representative of a variety of different agencies, just to try and get a feel for the services that they provide and also get a feel for the scope of the number of homelessness that reside in our community. The figures that were provided to us are as follows. They account for roughly 109 homeless people living on the streets. This was a count that was done in January of this year and is done every January. From our understanding, this is literally people going around, walking around, identifying people. And so that was roughly about 109. But more importantly, there's big aspects of it that are programs that are referred to as rapid rehousing or homeless prevention programs, which both of those are in the hundreds. So for instance, they estimate there's about 233 people going through rapid rehousing programs, which is just what the words insinuate. There's just a lot of change in the housing situation, which ties a little bit into the homeless prevention program, which has about 321 people. And oftentimes that comes in the form of assistance with short-term rent or other utility payment assistance that they might have. So those are the numbers that we have them as we know it. Part of that meeting was also inclusive of VISD. VISD has this McKinney-Vento program, which identifies students that aren't in a permanent, stable environment, and they estimate that it's roughly 900 students within the VISD program that are acknowledged in that program, which represents about 6 to 7% of their total student population. And these are people that don't have a stable home, that might be going from, one friend's to some cousin's house to just whatever the case may be. And so those were some of the facts as it relates to the number of homelessness and even the potential of more homeless with some of these other transitional programs that exist. We also had a chance to meet, or I had a chance to meet with the professor at UHV that put together those homelessness symposiums that occurred earlier in the year. And so that was very educational just to get a feel for those that participated. The city had a role in that. We had a few staffers that participated in some panels. And so that was good information for us to learn just about what this community has put together to learn about this homelessness issue. And all in all, it was simply just an educational opportunity for us. It's important for my administration to ensure that there's open lines of communication between city management and these entities. And so I think this was a continuance of that. And so I look forward to working with these entities in the future on how we can better partner with them, whether it's through the CDBG program or otherwise. But I just wanted to provide you an update on those meetings that have taken place. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have related to that, or I'm sure during the public hearing, if I'm wrong in any of it, I encourage them to come up to the podium and correct me or add anything else that they think is prudent, so that you have the facts as you consider this item tonight. If there aren't any questions on that, I would like to ask the police chief to come up, because another aspect that I think it's important prior to your deliberation of this item is hearing directly from our police chief on his opinion on the issue and any potential challenges that might come just with the issue and a potential ordinance. So Chief?
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. Purpose of my presentation tonight is to advise City Council on the enforcement of a potential anti-camping ordinance. Specifically, considering that much of the anti-camping ordinance discussion has been linked to the homeless, I feel it's important to discuss these issues as it will arise from an enforcement aspect. Let me first off begin by assuring City Council that the police department is prepared to enforce any ordinance that is approved and adopted. That said, my comments here will focus on factors that could be present when officers encounter persons who are homeless and in violation of the anti-camping ordinance. Specifically, there's a portion of the homeless population who are either mentally ill or in crisis. I believe it's important to have this discussion as it relates to them and it relates to the ordinance. If approved, obviously this would become law and as such, subject the person to arrest and other potential criminal proceedings. There's been much discussion recently regarding complaints about a specific homeless person in the Old Victoria neighborhood. Now, this person does appear, and I'm told, is mentally ill. Up until recently, I have been told this person has been known as someone who is also service resistant, meaning that they don't seek out or accept social services or help. I say up until recently because I'm told today that this person is currently receiving housing and at the moment is off the street. Well, let's assume for a moment that this person was found in violation of the anti-camping ordinance and was then arrested. A very likely scenario would be that the person would be taken to the county jail. Once there, that person would be subjected to the county jail's booking intake criteria, which consists of a series of questions designed to help determine whether or not incarceration is the appropriate and actually suitable. This comes about due to an ongoing effort in Texas and other states to decriminalize the homeless and look closely at their options other than incarceration when homeless persons with mental illness are arrested. Now, I certainly can't speak for the sheriff or the sheriff's jail staff, but I'm confident and it's highly likely that this person would fail the booking intake questionnaire and deemed to be unsuitable for jail custody. The county jail is simply not resourced in a manner to support incarceration of the mentally ill. And at this point, suitable diversion options would be explored. However, currently, this remains a significant service gap within our community. There simply is no place to go. Officers would then be required to release the person outside the facility, and he or she would be free to go wherever that person pleases, even if it's right back where that person was arrested. It's important to emphasize the point that the county jail intake screening process is stringent, and it's in compliance with Senate Bill 1849, otherwise known as the Sanders-Bland Act, which was signed into law in 2017. Again, the law and the sheriff's intake process are designed to ensure suitability and to divert persons with mental illness from incarceration. Now again, in closing, I just want to make sure that council is aware that the anti-camping ordinance can and would be enforced. However, it is by no means a panacea for solving the camping issues when homeless persons, particularly those with mental illnesses, are involved. And from a police department perspective, we simply just cannot arrest our way through that problem. And I stand ready for questions if there are any.
What does the length of incarceration say that this person was accepted into the jail? For a class, is it a Class C?
It was a Class
misdemeanor?
C, and I to be honest, I think it would depend on the individual and the charges that were made against them, and how quickly they could be, brought into court, whether or not they would be released on their own recognizance or on bail. So it would differ.
But if I can add a little bit to that, of course, there are specific time periods for magistration. I believe it's 24 hours that person has to be magistrated within the jail. And within Texas law, there are there's significant relief to bonds for people who are indigent. So if the person is indigent, they're most likely going to be released on a personal recognizance bond at their magistration. And so it's unlikely that person would be in the jail for more than 24 hours, even if they did meet the intake standards.
Thank you.
Any questions for the chief? No? At this time, I'll turn it over to Thomas.
Thank you. I have a couple of comments that I'd like to make publicly about the ordinance that I've brought back to you, and then I'd like to recess into executive session briefly to go over the legal opinion that I have on this subject. The public comments that I have on it have to do with some differences between the Sugar Land ordinance that you asked me to bring back a draft based on, and the ordinance that I wound up bringing back to you. I included in the packet of information, if you read, a discussion of some of the reasons for those changes. But in addition to that, there are some provisions in this ordinance that go beyond what Sugar Land has and that are optional if you choose to continue on with them. But I wanted to point out to you that they were different and that you may choose to strike them if they were not what you were looking for. I was operating in a bit of a vacuum trying to draft this ordinance and bring it back. My only instructions were to bring back something similar to what the city of Sugar Land had. And so I added in a definition of what public places look like, and included in that definition is a description of common areas on private property. That goes beyond what was in the Sugar Land ordinance. I included it because I saw it in other cities' ordinances, such as San Antonio and Laredo. I don't know whether council is interested in adopting an ordinance that extends that far. I hope that you'll have a conversation about whether or not you want to include that. Likewise, in the definition of what is camping, I drew concepts from other cities, including a connection to sleeping in vehicles. That was not in the Sugar Land ordinance, but it is in what I brought back to you, as well as campfires, building a campfire or cooking in public places as part of the definition of what constitutes camping. And so I hope that when you get to your discussion of this ordinance, you'll consider those provisions as optional and have a discussion about whether you want to extend the ordinance you're looking at to include those concepts or whether you want to strike them. That being said, I'd like, Mayor, if I may, to ask you to recess into executive session so that I can have a conversation with you guys under the attorney-client privilege.
And that will be moving item H1 up to this
Yes,
portion
sir.
of the meeting.
Yes, sir. So that being said, the city council will recess at this point at 5:20 PM for executive session on the 6th day of August 2019 under Texas Government Code Section 551.071, consultation with an attorney on a matter involving pending or contemplated litigation or another matter in which the duty of the attorney to the government body under the Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with the Texas Open Meetings Act. Thank you.
would you please establish the time?
The time is 5:49 PM.
Okay, we're now back in open session. The item before us is item C1.
C1, that is correct. We do not yet have a motion or a second on the item.
Make a motion to approve C1.
Second.
Do we have that before the public hearing?
We typically do take a motion and a second. That follows strict Robert's rules. That's fine.
Sorry.
There's been a motion and a second to approve item C1. And now I will take the opportunity to open the public hearing on this matter. So those wishing to speak to this matter, please step forward and state your name.
And Mayor, I have my 5-minute timer, so I can make sure I check
Okay.
myself.
Thank you.
I'm so used to the 5-minute clock rolling backwards, so I appreciate that you don't want it, but I need it. My name is Kim Pickens. My address is 812 Blythe, and I am a homeless advocate. I thank you for your time. Mr. Garza had given you guys some information that I was going to also mention about the definitions of McKinney-Vento, the 895 youth that are K through 12 that were homeless by definition, and the definition of homelessness that is used in the point-in-time count that is conducted every year across the country. But I will not bore you with that. I will say that for the point-in-time count, we have 24 hours to count as many people sheltered and unsheltered as we can. That all depends on how many people want to be counted and how many people we have to help count. So it's never an exact number of our situation. It's merely a snapshot of a 24-hour period in our city. The information that was on the for the point-in-time count for ours, and like I said, the 109 I didn't get. I had 157, 138 adults, and 19 children under the age of 18. 65 female, 73 male. Chronically homeless that are identified were 8, and veterans 2. The National Coalition for the Homeless gives the reasons why people are homeless as foreclosure, poverty, eroding work opportunities, reduction in public assistance, lack of affordable housing, lack of affordable health care, domestic violence, mental illness, and addiction. Homelessness results from a complex set of circumstances that require people to choose between food, shelter, and other basic needs. Only a concerted effort to ensure jobs that pay a living wage, adequate support for those who cannot work, affordable housing, and access to health care will bring an end to homelessness. Some of the barriers that we have here in the Crossroads are lack of affordable housing, which is number 1, lack of funds or resources to replace IDs and birth certificates, limited access to jobs, and limited access to educational opportunities. I come with solutions. Securing an ID for persons who are homeless, create a policy that allows a homeless person working with an identified organization to receive a birth certificate for themselves and or their children for free. This allows the person the ability to apply for photo IDs, housing, and other services. Create an office of homeless services that coordinates city functions with nonprofits and churches to address eviction prevention, tenants' rights, rapid rehousing, food insecurity, supportive services in underserved communities. Adopt the housing first philosophy. Look at addressing the immediate need of housing people so they can be secure, and then ensure there are supportive services available to create success. Realizing intergenerational success through education, provide intensive wraparound support for families, connecting adults to housing assistance, job coaching, and other services while helping children receive access to tutoring, building social, emotional skills, and joining out-of-school programs, which Kids Connection does a fantastic job of. Day centers located in at least 2 areas of town. Expand on the Midcoast Family Services Drop-In Center that happens on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 1 to 4 p.m. That allows showers, food, laundry, a computer lab, case management, etc. Create opportunities for affordable housing with new apartment complexes by having a certain percentage of units be available on a sliding income scale. And the big one, a designated camping area on unused city parking area that has 24-hour security, access to bathrooms and storage, administered by a nonprofit or a church where participants have to register for a campsite and follow rules for a campground. Those are just a few of the things that we can do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to speak? And by the way, you do not have to give your address. Simply your name would be sufficient.
Mr. Mayor, Council, my name is Jim Cole. I want to thank you for your service and your interest in the plight of the homeless. Dealing with the homeless is not easy. There are few right answers. I respect your desire to do the right thing for our community. In my opinion, the proposed ordinance is really about one person. The homeless person who lives, or at least until yesterday, lived in the Old Victoria neighborhood. The part of Old Victoria where she lives is an affluent area. Professionals, doctors, lawyers, among others, live in the area. I live in the area. Councilman Young, Dr. Young, lives in the area. Dr. Starkey lives in the area. Considering the number of homeless people living in much less affluent neighborhoods, it is hard to separate where this one homeless person has chosen to live from the action the council is now considering. I understand and appreciate my neighbor's concerns with having a homeless person living in the neighborhood. The concerns are real. I will say that the opinion that Victoria should pass an ordinance to allow homeless persons to be arrested for sleeping in our neighborhood is not held by everyone in our neighborhood. I don't believe that it is held by a majority of the people living in our neighborhood. I oppose this ordinance. Many of my neighbors oppose the ordinance. There was no proposed ordinance when she was living under the bridge on Bluff Street. There was no proposed ordinance when she was living at the old train station in Riverside Park. Dealing with homeless people is a difficult problem. They are unsightly. In my opinion, if you use the definition of chronically homeless as someone that has been homeless for more than a year, most chronically homeless people deal with mental illness. Dealing with mentally ill people is not easy. Dealing with mentally ill people with no resources is especially difficult. I have had the pleasure of interacting with this homeless lady many times over the years. I am not a doctor, but I can say with some certainty, this homeless lady that is the target of this ordinance deals with mental illness. I do not have the answers. Homeless persons are individuals and their situations vary. The appropriate way to deal with homeless persons varies. Having a homeless person living in a neighborhood without readily available sanitary facilities is a problem. The proposed ordinance will not solve or even address the problem. Your city attorney has told you that this ordinance is not constitutional. Your chief of police has told you this ordinance will not work. Putting a mentally ill person in jail will create more problems, not solve the problems. A homeless person that is jailed will soon be released from jail. And as Chief Craig said, when the person leaves jail, she will still be homeless and she will still suffer from mental illness, and that if anything will have been made worse. She will likely return where she was before she was jailed. In my opinion, the proposed ordinance is almost certainly unconstitutional. In my opinion, using taxpayers' funds to fight a very expensive legal battle with almost no chance of success is a foolish expenditure of government funds. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Anyone else, please step forward, and only your name is sufficient.
My name is Kenny Jones. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Garza, and council members. This gentleman said it perfectly, so I'm not going to repeat what he said. I just want to share with you a story of a gentleman. This gentleman was in and out of jails, had been to prison twice, was an addict, was an alcoholic, and really didn't have much hope. He came to the Salvation Army in 2006. I am that gentleman, and I stand before you saying that this ordinance, not only is it inhumane, it's not necessary. We need to work together as a community and be a model for other communities and say, this is what we've done to stop the problem. This is what we've done to help the folks that need our help instead of just putting them in jail. If we can be a model for other communities, this could take a shape from the Southwest Texas and run all the way up. Let's be a model for other communities and do something different. I'm a member of the Homeless Coalition. I know I would love to sit down with each of you and share more of my own experiences and how the Salvation Army and other organizations, not just the Salvation Army, can make a difference in the lives of these folks. So instead of putting them in jail, bring them to me. Let me talk to them. They do suffer, most of them or a lot of them, with mental illness. We need to address that. Once we've addressed that, we can take care of a lot of the other problems. But I encourage this city to step back for just a moment. Let's find another way for just a moment, and then let's move on with a better solution. This is not a solution. Einstein said it best: when you continue to do the same things over and over and over and expect better results, you're insane. This is insanity. This is not going to solve the problem. We need to be good stewards, and we need to remember what Jesus himself said, that, hey, you know, I was out there and you didn't give me a cup of water, you didn't give me food. I was naked and you didn't put clothes on my back. I don't even know you, and I don't want to be that person that stands before him. So thank you for your time. God bless you, and thank you for what you do.
Thank you, sir, for your comments.
Hello, my name is Lisa Griffin. I'm the president of the Victoria Area Homeless Coalition. I do appreciate your meeting with us, Mayor McCoy and City Manager Garza. I gave you some details at our meeting. I'm here primarily to correct some of the numbers that I want to just give a better picture of. So we did count 109 persons homeless on the point-in-time count in January. Since that time, 82 additional homeless have been identified through the daycare center. So that's 109 plus 82 that we know of. And these are the people that you're seeing on the streets. This is the constituency that you believe you have a problem with camping. It doesn't touch those who are at risk of being evicted, those who have slept in their cars and at a cousin's house and are back out on the street and are homeless again. Those numbers were about 600 people. And so I wanted to just clarify that. That's what you're looking at. I also wanted to let you know that the person that was staying in that very affluent neighborhood is staying there because she grew up there when she was a child, and that's where she feels safe and she feels comfortable. That was her neighborhood, too. So finally, the last thing I wanted to do was share with you a couple of ideas that I brought to the mayor and to the city manager, and that is that public restrooms along the 2 transit routes would solve your issues with urinating and defecating in public. People who are on that transit route, takes a very long time to get from one side of town to the other. And I believe that it would be beneficial to the city for us to look into that. That would be a solution to that problem. A camping ordinance would not be a solution to that problem. In addition, another solution that we identified was low-income affordable housing, not affordable housing. We're talking about people who are low income and who are at risk every month of not being able to pay their rent, and so they need something more affordable, and or the creation of jobs that pay real wages that you can live on. And finally, I just wanted to let you know that the people who are in our community are members of our community. They're members of your community that you represent, and I don't think that you are representing them well, and I don't think you're representing their best interests here by putting in a camping ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you for clarifying the numbers.
My name is Rudy Vargas Jr. I'm pastor of Heaven Sent Baptist Mission, and I have the duty and honor to work with the homeless here in Victoria for the last 3 years, every week. And I'm here also opposing the ordinance, and I just want to say it's not going to solve the problem. And, we're out there weekly, and, I know that we've also in the past tried to help them, keep their campsites clean and things like that. But, like a pastor that's on our ministry, he said, we have to just look at them as they are, they're people, and not to be looked at as just a nuisance, They have nowhere to go, we'd arrest them, lock them up, and then it'll be the same thing when they come out, they don't have a place to go. So, I was in the same state at one time, and so, we just continue to work with them out there, and we're just praying y'all make the right decision. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm Jenny Stafford. I'm Chief Executive Officer of Midcoast Family Services, and I'm sure you're tired of seeing my face, but I've got to throw my opinion into the discussion tonight. Having said that, there are many times I've thought about what you do and how I maybe someday would like to run for public office and be where you are, making those decisions that make our community better. I don't want to be you tonight. You've got a really tough decision ahead of you, and whichever way you do it, you're going to make some people unhappy with your decision. But I don't believe that there is a good answer to the public camping issue. For one thing, the ordinance is going to be very difficult to enforce. I don't believe that incarceration is the correct answer. One of our problems at Midcoast is because where our office is located, a lot of people who get out of jail come directly to our thrift store because they want new clothes, or they've lost their clothes, they've lost their shoes. And what we see immediately is they had their mental health care needs taken care of while they were in jail. Soon as they walk out that door, that need is no longer met. And all we can do is give them a set of clothes and put them on a list for an assessment. But they're right back where they were when they started from. And so that's a real gap in our community right now. Emergency shelter is not the answer. Emergency shelters are like an emergency room. It's for people to go for a short period of time when they're in a critical situation. You don't want to live in an emergency room. You need a house instead of a place for stabilization. And criminalization doesn't work. If it did, people would be doing it all over the country. You need to know these very same discussions are happening every city in America of any size at all. I sat and listened to a forum yesterday that was happening in Austin, and they're having the very same discussion that we're having. I do feel it's necessary that I address a couple of things that were said at this podium at the last meeting. A lot of the people that you see on the street and the ones that use the emergency room and that get arrested and that get kicked out of stores because they misbehave and get kicked out of any kind of public place because they misbehave are chronically homeless. We don't get to make that definition up. I pulled the definition from the Federal Register. It's long and tedious, so I just picked out the good parts. But a chronically homeless individual is an individual or a family who resides in a place not meant for human habitation, a safe haven, which Victoria has none of, or an emergency shelter, such as the Salvation Army or the Midcoast Family Women's Shelter, and has been homeless and residing in such a place for at least 1 year, or at least 4 separate occasions over 3 years, equaling a 12-month period. So, in other words, it's a long extended person. It's not somebody who's just recently become homeless, and has a diagnosable substance abuse disorder, serious mental illness, developmental disability, post-traumatic stress disorder, cognitive impairment resulting from a brain injury, or chronic physical illness or disability. Now, I want you to think about trying to give somebody like that a ticket and tell them they have to move on, how difficult it would be. Most of the people that are in a public place are going to fall into this category of chronic, regardless of what we found at the point in time. A couple of more issues that I have to address. One of them is the panhandling issue. Some of the homeless people panhandle. The majority do not, because it's exhausting. We tried one day, the Homeless Coalition tried to panhandle one day just to kind of experience it. It's exhausting, it's insulting, and it's demeaning. Most of them will panhandle enough until they get money for food, for laundry. Some of them will panhandle long enough to get a hotel room for a night, but they're done after that. The only people that I can think of that could maybe raise $300, $500, or $700 would be the firemen who do it for charity. I don't know a single panhandler who can raise money to live on. And to have a sign in Victoria saying, "Don't give to panhandlers," to me communicates a lack of personal decision. For me, it's a matter of spirituality almost. I give because I've been blessed. I don't give a lot, but I can tell you when I give $1 to that homeless person, it may mean they can go to McDonald's and get a 99-cent hamburger. If you give $1 to Midcoast, it's not going to go nearly as far. So the dollar goes much further to a panhandler than it does to a nonprofit. A couple other problems. I'm sure if I use my 5 minutes, I want to also echo the need for a public restroom and want to just say that I don't think our goal should be ending public camping. Our goal should be ending homelessness in Victoria. I appreciate the attention that this matter has brought. I can't tell you how thrilled we were to meet with the city manager and the mayor and tell them about our programs. I invite you all to visit with us, to come to our day center, to visit Christ's Kitchen. Trish said to extend an invitation to you. It will change your perspective to sit down across the table from somebody and realize what a human being facing those kind of issues sounds like. But I do have a request. We believe permanent supportive housing is the answer. It's not emergency housing and it's not transitional, but it's permanent housing. And Midcoast is in the process of applying for funding. We need match money. For us, $40,000 is a whole lot of money. We already put up $50,000 for the programs that we have. We need another $40,000 to be able to provide 28 new apartments for chronically homeless individuals. I urge you tonight, I see the gavel, I urge you tonight to vote with compassion, to vote thoughtfully, to use empathy, and to find the real solution to a problem that exists here in Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else to speak to this in this public hearing? All right.
Hi, good evening. My name is Mallory Thurman. I am the treasurer of the Victoria Area Homeless Coalition, and I'm also the person that runs the day center. The day center has been successful. We've had a lot of people come through. It's a great resource that Victoria needs, and also we're hoping to expand our hours to help serve more people. I do want to make a couple notes that one, Gulf Bend the Gulf Bend Wellness Center does not house the homeless people at all. So with that being said, I do think that we do need more supportive housing and also housing ends homelessness. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Tyler Starkey. You know, as with anything, I was on the council before, and there's always difficulties meeting the needs of both sides. I think Victoria is a very compassionate town, and I've lived here since I was 3 years old. And we have a lot of organizations in town who are willing to step up and have stepped up in the past to take care of homeless and other needy people. You know, I agree with Jim Cole that the lady who was living downtown did cause a problem because she was defiant, and the problem was there was no law on the books that allowed the police to do anything. A lot of complaints that occur, and when things are enforced, it's complaint driven. In other words, I don't have any idea that the police, once they get this, are going to drive around in their Suburbans and start picking up homeless people. That's not going to happen. This is complaint driven. And so if someone is camping out in Woodway or Country Club or Old Victoria or anywhere on your front curb and you don't want them there, then you could say, hey, I know that's public right of way, but I'm taking care of it and you can't camp out on my front lawn. So it gives the police a tool to use. Again, it's complaint driven. They're not going to be driving around picking up every homeless person they see. And with Chief Craig, I agree that that would be difficult if someone was being belligerent and causing a problem in a neighborhood and said, I'm not going to leave. And, you know, they do get picked up. At that point, there's an option of institutionalizing them, as the lady in Old Victoria as that was done for the last 3 weeks. But also being proactive, I know that he would say, okay, I need to, before I arrest this person, if we realize there's a problem, we're not going to just put them back on the street, but we're going to partner with institutions or facilities in other towns, such as happened recently in Old Victoria, in Houston, where this person was taken. But there's other places around too, I'm sure Austin and other cities who have facilities where they can evaluate these people. But again, I don't think that the police department, knowing as compassionate as they are, is going to, again, start driving. When they get this law, they're not going to start driving around picking up homeless people. That's just not going to happen. And we have a lot of great organizations in Victoria who maybe have, I think they're already aware of the situations, and as Raleigh McCoy said, you know, maybe they can all get together as they have already, and they can look for solutions to this problem. One amendment some of y'all have copies of is to this homeless ordinance or anti-camping ordinance, is about Amendment A was a motorhome, travel trailer, boat, or other camping vehicles may not be parked on or remain in front of a house, even if it is private property. They can't park on the right of way, they can't pull in the front lawn or anything like that and stay there. That's just part of anti-camping, I think, to keep our streets and neighborhoods and presentable and safe, is that people can't just pull up and live in front of a house. And so that's not a good way for people to live, and it's no respect to the neighbors either. So I would ask that Amendment A be considered. Amendment B, as Jan Scott said, is we may already have laws that regulate public camping, and that's something to just look at. Thanks very much for considering this.
Thank you, Mr. Starkey. Dr. Starkey.
Hi, I'm Kim Kalk, and I have a couple of things to say. He was addressing mental illness and saying that, you know, they needed to be hospitalized. Well, I can tell you from experience, I have a sister who is schizophrenic. They keep them for 2 weeks, they regulate their meds, and they put them back on the street. That's all they can do. A lot of them don't have insurance. Some of them can't even stay that long. They will get them on meds, and then they will send them out. But with no way to buy meds and no way to go and get meds, they are not medicated for very long. So institutions are not an answer. The problem is that myself, I'm on the edge of homelessness every month. It's a hit or miss. And this has been going on since I was, my parents died when I was in my early 20s. And then I got married and had kids. Then I became a single mom. So my daughter is 22, my son is 28. I was a single parent the whole time. And I can tell you, we were this far away from homelessness every month because I couldn't make enough money and the rents were too high. The state puts the area median income in Victoria at $68,000. That's not anywhere near the truth. And the majority of the people having the problem are making $20,000 and under. You can't live in an apartment in Victoria if you make less than $20,000 a month. Even those that make $30,000 are on the edge. There's just nowhere for them to go. And this ordinance is, I think, backwards. We need to find a solution and help them find something before we say you can't go here. Where are they going to go? There's no shelters. And I just don't know where they're supposed to go. There's not a solution. This is putting the cart before the horse. You find a way to help them, then make the ordinance. But you're basically punishing them for being homeless. And as we've said, as many have said, it's unconstitutional. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Gail Ford Henselka, and I am here representing my mother, who is the person that is being directly affected by the lady that is homeless. This is not an affluent neighborhood. It is an old neighborhood. And she is the oldest citizen in that neighborhood and one of the oldest citizens of Victoria. She is so terrified. This woman has entered the gates, beat on her windows to the point I have had to replace windows with thicker glass. Yes, I am the person that has brought a citation against her because she has repeatedly come in that yard. She is camped out directly across from my mother's property. We have had to put locks on all the gates. My mother's terrified. I go over there. I am scared. I am having to park around the block to sneak in to get to mother's. I don't know what she's going to do. She lays on the streets and moans. She hollers out at night. These people that are helping her and enabling her come by, drop off the Whataburger sacks, or sit there and talk to her a few minutes. My dear mother is the one that is having to endure this. They say she grew up in that neighborhood. My mother has been there for decades and many decades. I can tell you, she is not familiar to the neighborhood. This is no matter of affluence. This is a matter to help this woman. These enablers are not helping her, leaving her on the street that way. It is not the way to handle this. The police have been wonderful. The first time, I have 3 security systems for my mother. I have cameras everywhere. I can tell you what this lady does. I don't think anyone should have to live the way she is. She needs help. She needs definite medical help. I have talked to doctors about this. I have talked to the legal people. This is not the thing that Victoria needs on the streets and the way to handle it. Every day I go in fear. What is she going to be doing? Is she going to be going to the restroom in front of me? And it happens, people. And I don't think any of y'all want this at your mother's door. You know, when you hear a lady say, I heard her screaming out, that's not the way to have it. Solve it. It needs to be solved. They don't need to, she doesn't have the right to be camping out on the streets. Dr. Starkey took and tried even gently putting some brush that she would move on. I watched her Friday afternoon when she came back from wherever she was. She comes back with her 4-inch boots that she was given in tight jeans, a shirt, and a plastic bin on her head. And before I could get parked, my son was with me. He said, Mom, it's the lady, she's back, there's her blanket. And the first time she came to my mother's door was a Sunday evening with a red blanket on her head, beating on the door. She dug in the flower beds. Don't ask me what she was looking for. I don't know if it was a key or what, but she has repeatedly been in there. This is not right, people. This ordinance is a good ordinance. It will help the people. It's not the solution, but please take care of your citizens. Please. It's not a matter. There's a little old lady that's very, very scared. And I don't think any of y'all would want it on your mother. You might want it on someone camping by your door, but you surely don't want it at your mother's door. I asked you to please approve it. I asked the enablers to please really get her help. And I thank the police and the city of Victoria for being there for their citizens, because the minute I went at 8 o'clock that next morning after that first time, they were lovely and very accommodating to me at the police department, and I appreciated it. And my mother did, sorry.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Jody Sandoval. I am with the Be Well Victoria project. I sat for as long as I could sit today. I do want to say that this ordinance is not a solution, but we are. We have the ability to come together as a community, not just during political season when we're trying to get votes, but to go and sit down at the table with our community members. Every single community member matters. So I ask and invite you out to our Be Well Victoria meeting, which our next one will be August the 20th at 5:30 at the Victoria Public Library. These meetings consist of not just social service workers, but also real community members who live and face homelessness every single day. Guys, we are the solution, but we all have to do this together. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Does anyone else want to speak in the public hearing?
You just can't see me over the
Okay,
because I'm so short.
I'm waiting for you.
Melissa Lyman, and I will be very short. We've heard a lot of things about how to fix our situation here, but the one thing that everyone has tiptoed around is mental health and who gives it. We have Gulf Bend Center. Why aren't they involved in this solution? When people get out of the state hospital, they should have a direct line to Gulf Bend for follow-up. I will say this for sure. People don't always want treatment. There is no doubt about that. But that is what we pay our taxes for. That's why they're here. But and I appreciate them having wellness centers and all those things, just like getting rid of their daycare center. Why is Gulf Bend not doing a daycare center for people who need it? Why is it doing it now by a public entity? And where's the money that they say they spent on the daycare program? Where's that going? Gulf Bend has to be at the table to solve this problem, and that is their job. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm Sandra Strickland. You heard me last time. Let me just say that we've heard a lot of agencies that have come out and said, well, we do this and we do that and we can do this and we can do that. It obviously is not solving the problem. We need something that is legal, and the ordinance would be something that is legal. Every time we've called the police on this one particular woman that started all of this, the police say, well, ma'am, there's just nothing we can do. Well, ma'am, there's just not a thing that we can do. We don't have an ordinance. We don't have anything that we can do. Then what are we going to do as a city? Nothing? Have all of these little agencies out here, what are they doing? Well, they tell you, I'm doing this, and we're doing that, and we're doing this, and we're not solving the problem, are we? We have to have something legal to stand on. And if we don't, this is going to go on forever. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm tall. Might need to. Hi. I'm Rachel Adami, and a business owner and a homeowner in downtown Victoria. And I was actually at the meeting when this all first got brought up. So I'm glad I got to make today's. I do thank y'all for what you do. What Jenny said is exactly how I feel. I wouldn't want to be in your shoes because I know some of you probably have plenty on your plate with your regular jobs, and then on top of that, y'all get to go home and think about all of this. Some of you have other careers, so thank you for what you do. I came today and was glad to hear what Chief Craig said about the enforcement, because that was my biggest concern. I thought, what are we really solving if we can put an ordinance into place? But he answered my concerns by saying this will just repeat itself. The Sandra Bland Act was passed for a reason. our local law enforcement will be very limited on what they can do. So I do know something needs to be done, and as she just said, something has to change, but this ordinance isn't it. So many people that have stood up here and talked already, I love little snippets of everything they have said, and affordable housing is what we have to do. They have to have a place to go. So I just really hope that y'all kind of look at the big picture and think that this is not the solution. It might be temporary whenever y'all get a phone call and they go pick someone up and they do the assessment, they find out that they cannot put them in jail because it's legislatively wrong. And then maybe like the other lady said, they get their meds adjusted if some of them have been off for a while. And then 2 weeks later, they can be right back out on the street again. So this ordinance isn't the solution. When you are looking for a solution, though, I do want to bring up that we've got to look at something that is comparable to Victoria. The Sugarland ordinance, I don't know which one of you said maybe we can look at something similar to that. Their spokesperson for the city said that they don't have restrictions on camping in any other areas because homelessness has never been an issue for them. That ordinance was brought up strictly for the Sugarland Town Square, which has some high-end shops, some nice restaurants and things like that. So I don't think we can look at cities that don't even have a homeless problem as a guideline. So I think we got to do a little more digging and find something that's a little more apples to apples. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak at the public hearing? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and open the matter up for discussion. There's been a motion and a second.
I'd like to move to amend item C1. If you'll follow with me on the ordinance, under A, definitions, I guess 1, I'd like to change public place to designated place. Means a primarily residential area and designated historic districts to which the public has access and includes but is not limited to streets, highways, parks, parking lots, alleyways, and the pedestrian ways. And end it there, striking the rest of the section. Section A2 then, camp means to use a designated place in lieu of public place. And then in section B, strike public in that sentence as well to say designated place.
Councilman Bucknight, would you repeat for your A1, the designated?
Yes. Designated place means a primarily residential area in designated historic districts to which the public has access and includes but is not limited to streets, highways, parks, parking lots, alleyways, and the pedestrian ways, period.
And you're talking about the historic districts. We have one historic district, and then we have other,
Ms. Scott, can I consider that to be a second so that we have it on the table for discussion?
yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we have a,
If you'll allow me to
Sure.
to address a couple of items in what he's proposing, and then we can get to your question, Ms. Scott. First off, I want to say that the phrase primarily residential area is defined elsewhere in our code. In section 5-147, the phrase primarily residential is defined to describe an area of property along one side of a public street between two adjacent intersecting public streets in which a majority of the total street frontage is used for residential purposes. By that definition, I understand that what Mr. Bucknight's proposal would do would be to extend this ordinance to the neighborhoods of the community, but it would not include necessarily all public locations within the community. It would leave available for public camping such areas as thoroughfares or other places that are not in residential areas or designated historical districts. If this amendment were to pass, it would be my opinion that the ordinance as proposed removes any of the constitutional burdens and would be legal if it were to be adopted.
And to your question, the historic districts, Mr. Gooch, do you still have that definition so I can provide it to her?
There are
Yep.
5 different historical districts.
There's
in the
5.
city.
We have College Park Historic District, which still would be primarily residential anyway, but I'm just making sure we're not missing something. 9 Rivers Historic District, Original Town Site Historic District, Victoria Heights Historic District, and the Historical Landmark Districts. Those are the 5 that we have designated right now.
And just really briefly, if this amendment passes and ends up gaining support, next time during a second reading, we'd be happy to bring as part of those readings maps that might help you understand the areas. Obviously, we don't have those maps right now.
Well, if I may, as part of the discussion, I know that we're trying to draft an ordinance that tends to solve the constitutional issues. But my main concern in adopting this ordinance is its effect, either the amended ordinance or the original ordinance. We still have the fact that these are Class C misdemeanors. The people that are arrested will be taken to jail. They'll be analyzed to whether the jail will take them. As the Chief pointed out, there will be questions involved. And in all likelihood, and probably from what my understanding is, in most instances, these people will be back on the street within 24 hours. So I really have an issue with supporting an ordinance that's going to create a revolving door and not truly solve the problem. This thing came up, this ordinance came to us at the last meeting. We moved to charge the staff with coming up with an ordinance to come back with us. We're in the basis of discussing this ordinance. Now, I have no issue with discussing it because I think I've always been an advocate of discussion. But my problem, where I'm hung up with it, is in the implementation. I don't see the value in passing ordinances that are just a revolving door just to say it's on the books. Now, many of the issues that were cited here tonight, I think could be under public nuisance ordinances, things that are actionable items, things that people do, not their status. And I think that we're short-circuiting ourselves by not considering those types of ordinances. There's other issues that are brought up tonight, other types of amendments that could be crafted into some sort of ordinance, maybe together or not. But I am not going to be in favor of moving forward tonight, myself. That's my personal opinion on it. And so, again, I ask council to consider the fact that we haven't really dealt with the idea, with the effect of this ordinance and how it's going to be implemented and what it actually does. Now, the one thing that I did learn a lot about, because we started a process, I met with these groups with Mr. Garza, the Homeless Coalition. These are people that have worked with the homeless in this community for a long time. And I don't know if we've heard enough from them about the situation to understand what we might be able to do to remedy this and even come up at a later date with a better crafted ordinance than what we're trying to do tonight. I'm not saying give it up. This ordinance and the revisions of it can reside on Mr. Gooch's hard drive for the weeks that it might take time to fully understand and engage the community in this matter. So that's my objection to moving forward hastily.
So my amendment, I feel, takes away the revolving door aspect that Chief Craig brought up. Officers have discretion on what they can and can't do. They don't have to arrest someone necessarily, but they would have a tool to move them out of these primarily residential areas. And the majority of our people living in these primarily residential areas can feel some safe harbor at their house. We're talking, the 109 homeless represent 0.16% of the city's population. I'm trying to protect the majority of the population and realize that these 109 people do have issues. And this isn't an ordinance to solve homelessness. That's not what this ordinance is. There's much work to be done on that. But this protects the citizens in our community and gives the police a tool to get these people to move along to a different area.
To move them where?
Well, they said they would bring back maps next time. They'll show you what primarily
Well,
residential areas.
I take exception, and I don't know if the chief can answer this question during this discussion. But I don't think that solving the constitutional issue of it solves the administration of the law. I think when you end up being incarcerated, the same law is going to apply, and it is going to still be a revolving door. If that person is released from custody, within 24 hours, they can go right back to that neighborhood. And yeah, you can pick them up again, and that's the revolving door.
Pardon me, Mr. Mayor, do you know of any towns that have cured homelessness?
Pardon me?
Do you know of any cities that have cured homelessness?
No. But let's
Well, I would like
let's-
to, and I
let's-
think that we can do this together. I think that we can acknowledge homeowners' rights as well as be compassionate. And there were some great ideas tonight to do some things. And I think there's some things that we can work on.
And I agree, Dr. Young, I agree. Work on it.
We have nothing right now. If a homeowner wants to sell their house and someone's camping out in front of their house, what happens to their property value? Who's going to buy that house? So we don't care about our homeowners.
No, I do care about our homeowners. But
So do
what
I,
I'm
and
saying
hence I
is,
think
I'm
we
not-
need
I'm not
something on the
against the
books that
concept.
moves them.
Go ahead, finish.
No,
your
I think that we have a tool for the police to do something. We have nothing right now.
I agree with Councilman Balknight and Young, and no offense to you, Mr. Mayor, but
No offense taken.
But my support of this ordinance has nothing to do with my desires to solve the homeless problem or my desires to solve the serious problems that we face with our mentally ill. However, my support of this ordinance is to protect the 60,000 residents who are taxpayers, who send us tax money with which we spend to support these organizations, among other things that we do. I think that there's a balance that we have to strike, and I agree that we have to have something on the books to protect against, not the situation that we're looking at now, but to protect against future situations that I envision, because, if we don't have an ordinance and other cities do, there are a lot of communities that have had problems because of that, because of their lenience.
And I'm not against the concept of an ordinance. I'm just saying that it needs further discussion in our community and further understanding of what the consequences are. And we may have laws on the books that aren't being used, public nuisance laws, things like that. When a person is out making noises and stuff, that's different than just laying. So I'm one that needs to have more information for me to be supportive of this. That's not to say that in a second reading or something, I may be convinced, but tonight, I'm not in a position of support.
I'll call the question on the amendment.
Right, there's been a question called on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
So since that amendment has passed, I will restate for the record that I believe that amendment cures the constitutional defects in this ordinance, and it removes any legal objection I might have to its adoption.
Is a motion and a second on the floor of the adopting the amended motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Myself.
That takes us to item C2. I'm sorry. Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah, F3.
All right. The mayor has indicated he'd like to take an item out of order on the agenda and move into item F3, which is acknowledgement of a
Chief Craig?
donation.
He probably won't hear you with all the.
Yeah, I see Chief Craig coming to the front, swimming upstream.
No paper.
Yes, sir.
Did you already finish?
Sure. We're going to do item F3, which is the acknowledgement of the Gulf Bend grant. Was it Gulf Bend? Yes, Gulf Bend donation of a vehicle.
1 second.
Okay, great. You were right, he didn't hear me.
Yeah,
He heard enough to come forward, but he didn't hear what he was supposed to bring with him. I'm sorry for that.
it's okay. You can probably finish reading it in the meantime.
Sure.
We get to take a ride.
My apologies. I couldn't hear anything back there. It was with the rush to get out of the city council meeting, which I don't understand. They don't want to stay and enjoy the fun. Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. Tonight, I'm here to recognize and acknowledge the generous donation from Gulf Bend for the donation of a Chevy Impala vehicle for use with our joint program, the Mental Health Peace Officers Program that we currently work with Gulf Bend on. I think you probably recall I've been here in front of you in the past talking about the Mental Health Officer Program. And one of the areas where we needed a little bit more help was in terms of transportation of vehicle. And Gulf Bend, one of our partners there, stepped up and made a very generous donation, which will allow us to continue to support that program and that effort. And I'd like to introduce Darlene Sestita, and she's the Chief Operating Officer from Gulf Bend, and I'd like to publicly thank you very much for your help and assistance in our endeavors. You want to say?
Just want to say that we really appreciate the opportunity to partner with Victoria Police Department and are glad we're able to make this donation.
Pardon me. Did you have any comments in regard to the homelessness in Gulf Bends?
No, I know it's a tough issue. It's something that we've been looking at and partnering with all of the different agencies within the city, so we're actively working on those issues.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your donation as well.
And that concludes my report. If there's any other questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
I think it goes without saying, thanks to Gulf Bend for this generous donation.
It was a very kind, generous donation on their part. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I believe that takes us back to item C2, which is a resolution approving the Community Development Block Grant 2019-2020 one-year action plan and authorizing the city manager to submit all required documentation for fiscal year 2019-2020 CDBG program and amendments thereto to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and declaring an effective date.
I move to adopt C2.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt item C2. I will now call a public hearing on this matter. Anyone wishing to speak to it, please step forward. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. And it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Item C3 is a resolution approving an amendment to the fiscal year 2015 through 2019 Community Development Block Grant 5-year consolidated plan and strategy, authorizing the city manager to submit all documents to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and declaring an effective date.
Move to accept item C3.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on item C3. I will now open a public hearing on this matter. Anyone wishing to speak to this matter, please step forward. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Is there any more discussion on the matter?
I just want to make a comment, because as I was reading these, and I know we've talked, we've had a lot of discussion about the city's support of various homeless organizations aiding the homeless. And I noticed in these particular block grants, the grants themselves, and there is information in there about what the city's done. So this is really kind of a public service announcement that if you go to the website of the city and find the packet and look at it, you can see some of the things that the city is involved with. I know they've been talked about already tonight, but they were there in black and white also.
Good point. Any further discussions or comments?
Just to expand on that, probably should have mentioned it with the previous item, but to reiterate Councilwoman's point, this plan year for 1920 includes $320,000 for public facilities for a combination for the Women's Crisis Center and the Perpetual Help Home. And so again, I just want to make clear that the city does support and continues to support some of our entities that are involved with homelessness. Obviously, there's more to be done, but I think it's important that we also capture the fact that the city has been involved and continues to be involved.
Good point taken. Any further comments or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Item C4 is a resolution approving an amendment to the Community Development Block Grant 2018-2019 one-year action plan, authorizing the city manager to submit all required documentation for the fiscal year 2018-2019 CDBG Program and amendments thereto to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and declaring an effective date.
I move to adopt C4.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to adopt item C4. I will open a public hearing on this matter. Anyone wishing to speak, please step forward. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Any further discussion or comments? Hearing none, I will, all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed?
Item C5 is an ordinance authorizing the issuance, sale, and delivery of the City of Victoria, Texas General Obligation Refunding Bonds, Series 2019, approving and authorizing an official statement and distribution thereof, a purchase contract, an escrow agreement, and a paying agent registrar agreement, approving and authorizing all other instruments and procedures related thereto, delegating authority to the city manager to select outstanding bonds to be refunded and to approve all final terms of the bonds, and providing for an immediate effective date.
Make a motion, we approve C5. Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt item C5. I will now open a public hearing on this matter. Anyone wishing to speak to it, please step forward. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Any discussion or comments?
Comment.
Oh, excuse me.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, I'd like to introduce you two individuals tonight. One, as you well know, our financial advisor is Robert Taylor, AKA Dusty, with RBC Capital. And then instead of a Noel, Tom Spurgeon with McCall, I always get this wrong, Parkhurst and Horton is here to represent as bond counsel. Dusty's going to talk about the structure of the bond, and Tom's going to give you the high-level overview of the ordinance, what it does, what the purpose of it. Thank you. Gentlemen? Oh, there you are.
Good evening. Again, for the record, my name is Dusty Traylor, a managing director with RBC Capital Markets. It's our honor and privilege to serve the city of Victoria as financial advisor. It's always good to be here. The item before you tonight is, as Gilbert said, is consideration of moving forward with a refinancing of certain of the city's outstanding general obligations. The city currently has a Series 2013 general obligation bond that we're looking at refinancing this evening. You guys, we visited many times in the past about refinancing certain of the other city's outstanding obligations. City of Victoria has always done a very good job of taking advantage of market conditions to reduce interest costs, and that's what is presented here this evening. The Series 2013 COs were issued at an interest rate at that time of about a 5.08%. Now, they were originally issued as a tax-exempt instrument. It's one of the reasons for that, or a taxable instrument. It's one of the reasons for that 5.08% rate at that time. However, we believe that we would have the opportunity to refinance them as tax exempt and refinance them in today's current low interest rate environment. We would anticipate, if we were in the market today, all-in interest rates on a refinancing of approximately 2.74%. That would give us the opportunity to produce debt service savings of approximately $693,000. If we were to look at how that savings is accrued over the course of the remaining life of those certificates of obligation, that savings is estimated at approximately $49,512 per year over the remaining life of those bonds, which run through 2033. And you can see, if you look in the presentation material that was passed out there earlier on page 3, we also show you potential savings if interest rates were to decrease a further 25 basis points or 1/4%, or if they were to increase 1/4%, or 25 basis points. This would still be in a range of some very, very attractive savings at this point. I know that we've discussed in the past kind of what a refinance is, but I'll just kind of bring it back up. A bond refunding is very similar to if you or I were to have our home loan outstanding at a higher interest rate, and we were to go and seek to reduce that interest rate by taking out a lower interest rate loan, reducing our overall interest payments. So that's the technicalities of what we would be doing here in terms of the analysis tonight, the economics of potential refinancing. I would like to turn it over to Tom Spurgeon to allow Tom to address the actual ins and outs of the parameters orders that you'll be considering this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, for the record, my name is Tom Spurgeon. I'm a partner with McCall, Parkinson, Horton. Our firm's had the privilege of being your bond counsel for many years. Noel Valdez is the one that you're more familiar with. He's out of the state today, or out of the city today, was unable to come, so I'm standing in his stead. I'm his partner in San Antonio. The ordinance you have in front of you is what we call a parameters ordinance. It's not the final terms of the bonds, but it is authorizing certain officials of the city to approve the final terms of the bonds and actually go forward with the authority that is being granted in the ordinance. The ordinance authorizes refunding bonds under certain parameters, and as long as those parameters are met, and either the mayor or the city manager approves the final terms of the bonds when it finally goes to pricing, the ordinance gives them authority to do so. This is something under state law that has been permitted for many years, where the legislature has allowed an issuer, when you're refunding bonds, to delegate to certain city officials to the authority to do exactly what this ordinance is doing, and that's to provide the flexibility that you need to kind of, in terms of when it's the proper time to enter the market and those type of things. So this ordinance allows for the city manager or the mayor to execute what we call an approval certificate that would approve all the final terms of the bonds. The type of terms that we're looking at are those that are under Section 1B of the ordinance, and certain parameters are that the total principal amount cannot exceed $5,860,000, that have to be sold at a price that's going to achieve a net present value savings of at least 3%. And Dusty can get into that a little more, but the numbers that they've run will certainly exceed that number. And there's also a parameter that the net effective interest rate would not exceed 5%, which the numbers right now are substantially lower than that. So that's the general terms of that. The reason you see blanks in your ordinance is that those terms will actually be filled in once we actually issue the bonds themselves. And so this is a standard thing that I think you have done in the past on some of your refundings, and it's a very, very common thing that is done. This also authorizes everything else, authorizes the official statement, authorizes the selection of a paying agent registrar, authorizes the selection of an underwriter or a team of underwriters to represent you all, or to actually sell the bonds or purchase the bonds, and levies, authorize the levy of a tax, et cetera. So this will be the sole action of the council, and then it would be taken to pricing at some point that when Dusty and his team is ready to move forward with that. And I'm happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
I would add a couple of things real quick, and then we're both happy to answer questions. One, this ordinance does not allow for any extension of final maturity. So this refinancing, the bonds would still be paid off on the same terms that the original bonds were issued. Another thing I would point out as well, and I think many on the council are aware of this, this is the type of refunding ordinance that you guys have approved many times in the past, a parameters resolution. So it's very similar to action the City of Victoria has taken previously.
I have a question that, is there, with these bonds, is there a time period in which they cannot be refunded? Because every time one of these comes up, I think to myself, why aren't we doing all of them if we have this wealth of high interest-bearing bonds?
Correct. We actually, this particular obligation that we're looking at is very unique. All of your other obligations now, based upon the Tax Reform Act of 2017, can only be refinanced when they get to their original call date. The call date on a bond usually occurs 10 years after its issuance. That's a function of tax reform. Tax reform eliminated issuers' abilities to do an advance refunding or refinance the bonds prior to that call date. However, these bonds, because they were originally issued as taxable, do not fall under that same limitation. And so this is one bond that just has that particular fact pattern right now that adds up to that. But we are constantly always looking at your portfolio of bonds to see how their call features are lining up with current market conditions to see if there is an opportunity to refinance those bonds.
And then also that you mentioned that this would be paid over the same original term, which means that the payments are going to be lower as opposed to paying it off sooner.
The payments will be lower, and it will
Right.
still have the same 2033 final maturity as originally issued. Yes.
Thank you for the explanation. I appreciate it.
So I got one question. I got one for you, Dusty.
Yes, sir.
So RBC's not looking for a recession in the next year, looking for a contraction in this quarter, and maybe another, 25 basis points cut in rates?
You were moving over into section 2, I suppose. Listen, it's interesting. Obviously, we had the Fed reduce interest rates last week, 25 basis points. Now, there had been some discussion widely panned in the economic media that we would expect maybe multiple rate cuts. Some of the discussion and the language that was released with the Fed's rate cut really seemed to indicate to the markets that that might be the only rate cut that we would experience right now. But one thing that I can tell you is the interest rate on municipal bonds has fallen by over 1% since November of 2018. We've had a steady decrease in rates with this anticipation of rate cuts and things like that. And I know many of you probably paid attention to the news this week. Earlier, obviously, yesterday was a very interesting day in, of course, the stock market, but it was also a very interesting day in the bond market as we saw yields fall even further yesterday by approximately another 10 basis points. So all in all, we are in a very, very good market for municipal bonds in terms of the interest rates being favorable for the city to be issuing them right now. Now, are rates going to continue to fall because we're going to be in some recession? Man, if I could predict that, I wouldn't be here.
And might I add one more item? From a global perspective, a lot of money from the Europe are flown into treasury bills. So that's bringing it down too. So it's not only the actual U.S. economy you're also dealing with it. You also think about from the global perspective, you got a lot of cash flow coming inside, buying those T-bills, causing that rate to come down. And I don't see anything that really being relieved in the future as well. So I don't see those rates coming up anytime soon. Anything else, Council?
Anything else? Any further discussion or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Thank you.
I think that moves us into the consent agenda.
It does, Mayor. It has become our practice to entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda without the items being read.
I move to approve the consent agenda, items D1 through D6.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda, items D 1 through 6. All those, is any other, there will be no discussions. It's
No
a
discussion.
consent agenda.
That's right.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? And there.
Item E1 is a resolution
May,
granting.
if I may we
may.
take a small break?
That's your discretion, absolutely. So
few
we're
minutes.
recessing now
And we will re-adjourn,
at 7:04 PM.
convene. And I think there's a desire to move up item E7, is that correct?
Yes, sir. Item
So we'll deal
E7.
with item E7, go ahead.
E7 is a resolution directing the publication of notice of intention to issue certificates of obligation of the City of Victoria in the maximum principal amount of $2 million, including the amount of bonds plus anticipated cost of issuance, for the purpose of paying all or a portion of the city's contractual obligations incurred to construct, improve, and repair city streets and sidewalks, together with landscape, drainage, utility line replacements, traffic and street signalization, and lighting improvements, and pay all of the city's contractual obligations for professional services rendered by engineers, attorneys, and financial advisors in connection with the above projects, and certificates of obligation, and declaring an effective date.
Move to adopt item E7.
And second.
Been moved and seconded to adopt item E7. Is there any discussion or information?
Just to answer questions you might have.
Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item E7 passes.
All right, we'll jump back to item E1, which is a resolution granting variances to section 21-92 and 21-94 of the Victoria City Code, which requires that when property is converted from one land use to another, that off-street parking facilities shall be provided in accordance with current regulations for the property located at 408 West Forest Street, owned by Eveline Bethune, and declaring an effective date.
Move to approve item E1.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve item E1. Is there any discussion?
Yes. Other than just voting against this, I thought maybe I would discuss it a little bit. I watched the Planning Commission discussion, and it seemed like a lot of their discussion, and it was a split vote with Planning Commission, and it seemed like a lot of their discussion involved the fact that this proposed waiver of the, or granting of the variance to this property that it would be used commercially was on a block that block taken by itself has other commercial properties on it. But the commercial properties on that block are on Moody Street. It's the Dairy Queen and the bond dealer. This is a house in the on the residential side. And I see that as very different. And I also recognize that we're trying to promote downtown, but I don't see that area of downtown as what we're trying to promote for commercial businesses. And a lot of the commercial downtown business people have been getting together and talking about various issues, one of them being that downtown is too spread out. And so I don't really think that that saying we're promoting downtown is a justification for this being on the other side of Moody from what is our traditional downtown. So I don't support this variance, and I wanted anybody that hadn't really had a chance to think about it to possibly hear my input.
And I support it. I think this is something we did similar right around the corner on
Staten.
State.
and
Thank
Vine.
you. Yeah, for peaches and tortillas.
That's correct.
And I think the Planning Commission said that one, they had said they don't plan to stay there permanently. There wasn't anything like that in this one.
I'd be surprised if they stayed there permanently, but I'm happy to have a bookstore in town at the same time.
That's true.
It is the only bookstore beside, well, I think we have a used bookstore and a Christian bookstore still in town, but this is the only bookstore in town.
I think it's a beautiful area of town. It's more of a residential area, very close, if not in the historical district. I do not want to destroy the look by having them have to put a parking lot in that lot. We're going to destroy the value and the look of downtown Victoria. It's a historical district. It may not be there long. Why destroy it forever just for a few years? I'd like to make it pass. I'd like to have it pass.
Ms., may I ask also, is this variance just specific to this particular business when it is occupying this location?
I'd have to verify how the resolution is written, but that definitely could be included in the resolution for it to be only.
I can't hear
I
you.
can't hear you.
Oh, I apologize. I would have to verify how that resolution's written, but it can definitely be added or amended to condition it to only this business and only this property owner.
Do we not have a standardized sort of approach to variances?
I thought the way it's written is strictly for that property.
Yeah, it is. It is written specifically to Evelyn Bethune.
Because of the nature of this variance, we're talking about a variance to allow the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. That would only be for this user. Other times, what you all are used to seeing is our standard practice is to make a variance apply to a lot so that it runs with the land, if we're talking about a variance that applies to the land. This doesn't apply to the land, this applies to this use of the property, so it's limited to that.
And we've done that in the past.
I believe that's correct.
Yes, we've done
Yes.
it both
Yep.
ways.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Fulgram.
Make a motion, we approve it.
Second.
It's already on the table.
Sorry.
Yeah, we've already got a motion and a second.
Already have a motion second.
Julie, do you want to
We'll do that
expand on
again.
staff recommendation?
Again, it's the
don't
or
need
the
it.
residential
Okay, I just-
nature of
I don't need it.
the neighborhood.
And if there's no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Item E2 is a resolution granting variances to section 20-82 and 21-63 of the Victoria City Code prohibiting double frontage lots and limiting residential driveways to local streets to allow the approval of preliminary plats for phases 2 and 3 of the ranches at Terra Vista and declaring an effective date.
I move to adopt E2.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt item E2.
Two.
That's correct. Is there any discussion on the matter? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Item E3 is a resolution calling for public hearings on the 2019-2020 City of Victoria budget on August 22nd, 2019, August 27th, 2019, September 3rd, 2019, and September 10th, 2019 at 5 PM at the council chamber on 107 West 1 Lynn Street and declaring an effective date.
I'll allow Gilbert to go over an updated timeline, but I just briefly want to comment that we're changing the budget calendar to not meet on August 22nd. There's a few scheduling conflicts, and you probably received an invitation too in your packet to an event that the COG is putting together with Senator Ted Cruz. That's for that same evening. And so that way it gives everybody an opportunity the option to go to that event if you so choose to. And so what's been handed out is just the updated resolution with the new updated dates. And Gilbert, if you can run through those, that'd be helpful.
Yes, sir. Senior Manager. What he handed out a while ago, the items highlighted in red are the new dates. As you recall, before, we were going to meet on the 27th, and then on the 22nd and 27th. So those were moved around. So what Officer Collins handed out now is the revised calendar that we're going to follow moving forward at this point on. So I'm requesting council, when they make your motion, to amend what you have in your package, or I'll let Thomas handle how it needs to be handled. But those are the dates on E1 that I just passed out in red that needs to be voted on. Thank you.
Because we do not yet have a motion on the floor for what's in the packet, the motion could be made to approve the substituted version of E3, which has just been passed out.
And correct me, I'm sorry, go ahead, sir. Go ahead. I was just gonna say, correct me if I'm wrong, Gilbert, but I think the updated timeline didn't actually add any new dates. So from the original dates we had distributed for you to reserve for meetings, we're not adding an additional date. We simply are making the timeline work within our existing regular city council meeting schedule and the dates that we had previously provided.
Correct. Actually, it kind of helps out council because on September the 10th, it was a special meeting. Now we don't need that special meeting because we moved it to September 17th.
Yeah.
So it works out great.
Wait a minute, but that's still on this calendar that was passed out.
That's an updated calendar that you have.
That's just an updated,
in front of
because
you.
I know y'all had some before.
Just a
I
different
wanna-
format for you.
But you just said we don't have to meet September 10th?
Not anymore. On the old calendar that I handed out a long time ago, September 10 was a meeting. I'm sorry, I
it's in
stand
red.
corrected. September 10th is a meeting.
Yeah.
A short one, a shorter one. Okay, I stand correct. A shorter meeting, not a long meeting.
Now, September 22nd perhaps is a meeting.
That's
that
the one
we-
I took out.
Let's just throw out all these dates, just.
Yeah, let's confuse everybody.
Yeah.
No, but the
Don't tell me
E-
numbers confuse you.
I'm easy confused. But the E3 with the ones in red, again, I'm repeating myself, is the ones that needs to be passed tonight.
And I'll follow up with an email to all of you as well.
Well,
This-
I move that we approve the amended item E3.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the amended item E3 that's been handed out. Is any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Item E4 is a resolution proposing a tax rate of $0.5960 per $100 evaluation, placing a proposal to adopt the tax rate on the agenda of a future meeting as an action item, and to call for public hearings for the proposed tax rate and declaring an effective date.
Before Gilbert goes through this item, I want to briefly just convey that the fiscal year 1920 budget has been officially submitted. You have received that tonight. That budget has been put together with the effective tax rate that is on this particular agenda item. The proposed budget is consistent with the budget workshops that we've already had, so I'm not going to go through summarizing all of those topics. But obviously, we'll have time during the public meetings that we have now rescheduled to discuss those items. So I encourage you to go through the budget document, and I look forward to those conversations. I'll also add, for the benefit of the public, that the budget will be available online after today, and that there's also a physical copy of the budget with the city secretary and also at the public library for anybody that might be interested in viewing a physical copy of our proposed budget. And with that, I'll turn it over to Gilbert to give a brief overview on the tax rate.
Thank you, Mr. Garza. One reminder, Thomas, just make sure, I handed out another revised E4. It's in red. Those are the calendar days that needs to be passed tonight. It supersedes the one in your package, okay? Due to the fact we changed the calendar.
And again, we don't yet have a motion on the floor, so if someone were to make a motion to approve the substituted version, we would be looking at the new dates
Or E4?
for E4.
Okay, council, I'm going to give you a quick, brief overview of the 2019 tax roll. I do this every year. I know you look forward to it. Basically, our certified tax roll compared to last year went up by 2.7. Once you take your protests and you deduct your frozen, you come up with net tax appraised value. What that number represent is the amount of revenues generated for the general fund and debt service. That number compared to last year went up by 4.6. If you subtract the new improvements, which is $35.6 million, that has never been taxed before, the adjusted net taxable value compared to last year, that means comparing last year's old values to this tax roll values, went up by 3.6. Okay? Any questions? Another way to look at the certified tax roll is from various different categories, net of exemptions. I try to break out the residential, compared to last year, 2%. Land went down by 3.3%. Commercial industrial utilities went up by 3.9. I expected to go higher, but it didn't. Agriculture stayed pretty flat. Tax exempt increased 2.865%. I'm still looking into why. But overall, there's a 2.7 increase from last year for your certified tax roll. Another way to look at it is from the overall market values. Your total market value compared to last year, it went up only 3.6. Once you take off all your exemptions, you're down to your certified tax roll at 2.7. Those exemptions equates to about roughly $4 million. Tax rate that we're talking about tonight, the proposed budget has 59.6, which equates to the same effective tax rate. Of course, it's zero compared to each other. From the general fund revenue side, you compare last year's revenue to this year's, we're increasing revenue by $191,000, so about a 1.2% increase. The reason for that, as I said before, $35.6 million of new added values generating $120,000. In addition to that, $71,000 coming from the 2018 Rose supplements, i.e. adjustment throughout the year's refunds. They kind of make it up the following year. That's $71,000. And for informational purposes, 1 cent equates to $359,000 at 97% collection rate, okay? I set a separate schedule for this one because the law has changed a little bit. As you recall, our city ordinance right now is at 5%. Actually, the state is 8%, but we have set ourselves at 5% in calculating the rollback tax rate. In the coming year, it's going to be set at 3.5%. That's the max that it will be used in calculating the effective tax rate. Anything above that, you don't have a formal election by the public. You're required to have one. I just want to make sure that's clear. In comparing the rollback at the current rate to the proposed tax rate, it's a difference of 1.55 cents, which equates to $556,000, or like I mentioned before, $359,000. That's all I have to say tonight. I'll turn it back to the mayor, city manager.
If I may, I don't know can I offer a new motion changing that tax rate?
At this point, we don't have a motion on the floor at all, so you could propose in your discussion, but from Robert's Rules of Order standpoint, it's probably better to get a motion on the floor so that we have this item up for discussion and then make a motion to amend in order to make the change.
All right.
I move to approve the substituted version of E4.
Second.
Now's the appropriate time. I would like to amend the motion on the floor to set the rate at 0.6115, which is the 5% increase over the proposed effective tax rate, and this for the following reasons. It is still below the current rate of 0.6224. It is in keeping with city ordinance of no more than a 5% increase without voter approval, and therefore obviously below the current state max of 8%. This would provide an additional $555,750 over last year's tax revenue, which coupled with $191,000 in general fund new revenue would provide $746,751, which I would propose to be used for infrastructure-related expenditures and nothing else. This would be the beginning of a more pay-as-you-go mentality. This money could possibly apply to projects in the CIP for the coming year, those that have been delayed from past years, and represent funding in the coming years that doesn't increase debt in order to get the work done. I requested from Mr. Garza a list of projects that have been delayed over time and was provided a list received from our Public Works Director, Mr. Reese, titled Street Rehab Projects that have either been delayed or deleted. That list identified 15 projects totaling $27,321,767. And I'm not saying that lack of funding is the sole reason for this, but I'm saying we need to better understand the delays in these projects since our constituents loudly say, fix our streets. Just because we set this higher tax effective rate tonight does not mean that it will be the final tax rate adopted at the end of our budget process. All this does is allow for a broader discussion. What worries me the most is that whatever rate we ultimately adopt becomes the benchmark next year when Senate Bill 2 goes into effect. That was passed in the last session, which limits increases to 3.5% of certain portions of the tax, which is below the city's current limit of 5% and the state's limit of 8%. My proposed amendment is put forth to allow broader discussion during our budget process, give us time to more fully understand and discuss the potential effects of Senate Bill 2 and what its effects are in possibly considering next year's budget.
Was that a motion?
The motion is to change the tax rate, but I gave my reasons
It's just a motion to amend the original
to amend
motion.
the original motion.
I second the motion to amend.
Thank you.
Any discussion on the amendment?
I have concerns that we can't hold future councils to the statement that you made.
So we can hold ourselves to the budget adoption of next year. The whole purpose is to open up discussion and not limit us. In other words, we start at that motion, then we can discuss it. Is it worth looking at the additional revenue that could possibly come in terms of our projects that we have? Can we, and on that list of 15 projects that I mentioned, there were numerous ones that could be paid for with that $700 and something thousand and move them forward and get them done. That's not to say that we automatically do it. I'm just saying it gives us the opportunity to do it, and it gives us an opportunity as a council to have a broader discussion on the matter. I'm not saying that the ultimate tax rate we set is what we set.
So,
I'm just trying to set the deal to allow us to do that, because my understanding is, once we set this rate tonight,
can't go up.
we can't go up.
So can you go through the math again on how you got the 700 extra
I
$1,000?
go back, I think in the presentation here, if I wrote it down right, there's 191,000 of new monies.
That's correct.
Pretty budgeted, though.
I don't think it is.
No, when I did you gotta remember, I did the effective tax rate, I wasn't considering any major new improvements. So when I gave you that budget in the workshop, it didn't have that $191,000 increase in revenue. Does that make sense? It was almost net. I didn't have an increase in revenue because I wasn't sure what our revenue is gonna be from the evaluation. I left that neutral.
Okay.
So if you go back and look, it's the same level income.
I just want us to be able to have that discussion. And clearly understand we're not adopting the final tax rate tonight. It's a procedural matter that I think is important, that we have a discussion
So
on
is
these
this
matters.
on the M&O side, or is this on the debt service side?
M&O side.
M&O side only?
Just to be clear on that and to address what Councilman Young said, I don't think I didn't hear you saying that the rate, I did hear that for this coming year, the additional funds that come in through
Right.
that rate would be used for infrastructure,
Yes.
maintenance operations in
Not
this coming
moving
year.
forward. That would have to
Not-
be determined.
Right.
But it starts a mentality of thinking that
But
way.
so you're doing two things. You're
Right.
setting the rate a little bit higher, but then saying that with the money that's raised this year, we're gonna
Right.
spend it this year.
That would be my proposal.
But coming into next year's budget, this is just the rate.
That's
And then
right.
we do what we will
That's right.
next year.
And to give us a better understanding of what Senate bill, because I hear of different public entities that are taking all kinds of moves. I don't think we need to take bold moves or anything, but I think we need to leave ourselves open to discussing the matter.
So this will
And that's
allow
the
for
only
public
purpose.
comment also? There'll be an opportunity?
Absolutely. We're gonna hear public comment during our budget process.
And if the direction is to focus these funds on infrastructure, from now until then, we'd be happy as staff to put some scenarios together on specifically what that money could be used for discussion purposes. And maybe at that time, maybe that helps the conversation. Obviously, we don't have that right now. But
just wanna
we'd be
give us
happy
the
to put something
opportunity.
together for that discussion.
So we got this list of projects that have been delayed or deleted. There's 15 items on there, right? This would pay for, could possibly pay for Bridal Ridge Phase 2, but not Phase 1, because it's over the budget. It could pay for Northcrest Highland Estates North. It could pay for Edinburgh Street, Navarro to Joplin, coupled with Wanland, Ben Wilson to Spiegelhauer, but that's kind of in the middle. And there were Wanland, Spiegelhauer to 59. So you got,
Or portions of others, it's just there for us to discuss.
There might be another one that's not listed on there. If I recall from previous meeting, Larry Lane
Larry Lane.
sidewalk, I believe.
Sidewalks.
Yeah,
That's
and to be
600.
clear too, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Donald, but this list was intended to be rehab projects.
Right. That's what they.
So it's not totally inclusive of some of the complete CIP big
Well,
projects?
this money wouldn't fit into that.
Correct.
Right.
And hence the list being focused on that.
Yeah, the parameters of the list I was asked to give basically asked for, projects that we've had on CIP lists in the past that we've either had to put off or delete. Leary Lane's never actually been on a CIP, so I didn't include that one.
Not close once.
Yeah, same thing with like, Magruder, Lingo, those types of projects.
Fair enough. Thank you for the clarification.
And again, to clarify, I'm not advocating this as the final. I'm advocating that we do this to allow the discussion.
It's our chance next to talk about this one more time.
You got plenty of chance. You got the whole month of August, September meetings, every meeting we have time to talk about it.
20th?
The next one is be the 27th, I believe.
No, our next meeting's the 20th.
Yep, you can talk about
2
it
weeks
there
from now.
and the following week. And then the
And
third,
that's
But
it.
really quickly though, Gilbert, just to clarify, so if it is talked about at our next regular council meeting, that wouldn't be a public hearing.
no, that'll make, thank
So
you.
just to be clear, so because the law requires a certain amount of days to pass before you have a public hearing, and we wouldn't meet that if we have a public comment portion of the tax rate on the 20th. That would have to occur on the 27th.
That's correct.
You as a council can discuss it on the 20th,
Exactly.
but the public comment piece wouldn't be an opportunity until the 27th. So I just want to make that clear.
Right, but, and when do we have to have the final set?
The tax rate technically is set when the budget,
On September
adopted.
17.
September 17th.
But we have the second tax rate vote on the 10th.
That's correct. In a public
First
hearing.
tax rate vote on the 5th.
That's correct.
So by the 5th, we should have
You should
this
know,
discussion wound up.
because you also going to have a public hearing on the tax rate, I believe, on the 27th too as well.
and I guess now, thinking of the timeline, if the first opportunity for public comment would now be, is actually de facto got moved from the 22nd to late,
27th.
to the 27th, gives a little bit more time to put information together, that might come from the meeting on the 20th, if you so wish to discuss it just amongst yourselves on the 20th.
Well, citizens could still comment on the 20th.
Oh, well, true, absolutely, yeah, but it wouldn't be a
Paying attention.
formalized,
Right.
advertised
citizens
public
comment.
hearing for that specific topic. Good point, thank you for clarifying that.
The only 2 cents I have to say about this, with the new law, is that from a financial perspective, irrelevant from the politics side, is that it gives you the advantage to study a little longer. You're not, because a lot of cities, I understand we've got to follow other cities, that whatever you do now is going to affect you down the road. So I'm not going to say follow the cities, but what they're doing, they're really looking at it, and they want to lock it in a higher rate, because you can't, if you lock in at the lower rate, it's going to take you really, really a long time to get to that point from a cash flow perspective or the loss in value of the money. So that's a big decision that y'all need to make sure to happen. If not, it's going to take you a larger tax rate to go up to that level whenever that has to happen. But that's from a financial standpoint.
Mary, I'd be okay just to listen to what discussion it brings about, since it's kind of brought on. I don't think it hurts to do that. I'm not saying I'm in favor of it at all right now. I'd like to see what one project could be taken care of.
I'm not asking you to be in favor. I'm just asking you to allow the discussion.
Yeah. Got my yay.
You have to call for a vote.
I'm good.
I'd like to call for a vote on my amendment. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No opposition, so we move to vote on the amended
That's right. The resolution.
resolution. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Item E5
Thank
is a
you.
resolution authorizing the publication of the Notice of 2019 Tax Year Proposed Property Tax Rate in accordance with Section 140-010 of the Local Government Code and Rules of the Texas Comptroller as calculated, as the calculated effective tax rate data has been delivered to the city by the tax assessor and declaring an effective date.
Move to accept item E5.
Second. It's Been moved and seconded to accept item E5. Is there any discussion on this matter?
Does that have to be amended?
Comment?
That's why I was just flipping the page to see whether that number is included in the resolution, and it is not.
Okay.
Right. Thank you.
Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of E5? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm also looking to see if it's got any dates in it that need to be adjusted, but
Item
Those
E6
Scrivener's errors?
is a resolution appointing Gilbert Reyna, Jr., CPA, as a representative to perform the effective tax rate and rollback calculations according to Section 26.04C of the Texas Tax Code and declaring an effective date.
Move to approve item E6.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve item E6. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
We've already taken care of item
Thank you,
E7,
Council.
so that takes us to city manager's reports.
All right, so we have, I guess, several items on this list. The first would be to make the announcement of the delivery of the budget. I already did that, so I won't do that again. I don't think you need to do anything else related to the tax roll. We already did the Gulf Bend donation item, and so really the only thing left is April and some updates that she has on appointments. I will say now that there will not be a need to go into executive session on economic development. So once we're done with the reports from city manager staff, we can adjourn the meeting. April?
Okay, I just have 3 quick reports. The Planning Commission appointments of John Hyatt, Gail Hode, and Jill Trevino will expire this month. Ms. Hode and Ms. Trevino are eligible for reappointment, and they do desire to be reappointed. Mr. Hyatt is not eligible due to term limits. The packet includes applications from several people, including Vanessa Hicks Callaway, Raquel Garza, Brittany Dearlum, Zachary Smith, Ashley Moulton, Bobby Leon, and Destiny Nicole Hood, as well as an updated application from Gail Hode and the previous application from Jill Trevino. So a resolution will be brought before the council at the next meeting, and at that time, we will do our vote to see who we appoint. The next report I have is that there was a resignation on the Board of Adjustments and Appeal. The commercial building contractor, Mr. Larry Tomanak, resigned from the board, and he must be replaced by another licensed commercial building contractor to fulfill the requirements of the board. The packet included applications from Bob Alvarez and Craig Logger for consideration, and we will bring a resolution before the council at the next meeting, and at that time, we will vote on which applicant will be appointed to that position. And last but not least is the appointment to the Library Commission. We had a resignation on that board as well, Ms. Sammy Sue Hendricks. So we have received 1 application to consider Destiny Nicole Hood, and a resolution will be brought before the council at the next meeting. That's all I have.
Reports. Then we shall stand adjourned.
Excellent.